They tell you never to turn your back on a wolf. They tell you to keep your head down, mind your business, and never, ever provoke an alpha. I broke all the rules. I had a stack of stolen council secrets clutched to my chest, a deadly conspiracy unfolding in the ink, and zero time for the fragile egos crowding the winter summit. I walked straight down the center aisle, blind to everything but the puzzle in my hands. I never saw the steel-toed combat boots blocking my path. I tripped. I fell. I braced for the harsh impact of the stone floor. It never came. Instead, two strong hands locked around my waist, twisting me mid-air and hauling me backward into a solid lap. I didn't hit the ground. I landed on the Lycan King. He rules the north. He hides a vicious, blood-hungry monster beneath a lazy smirk. And when his dark eyes met mine, I realized my biggest problem was not the treason hidden in my folders. My biggest problem was the king who just caught me, and the violent beast inside his head who just decided to keep me. Chapter 1. The Winter Summit always gave Harper a headache. Pack leaders from all over the continent gathered in one giant hall to argue about borders and meat supplies. They talked in circles, they puffed out their chests, they wasted time. Harper had zero patience for it. She walked down the grand center aisle, clutching a thick stack of stolen trade documents to her chest. She found the folders sitting unattended on a side table near the council room. A smart girl never walked past free information. She flipped through the top pages as she walked. The numbers did not make sense. Someone was skimming profits from the Northern Territories. Harper kept her eyes glued to the paper. She walked fast. The hall buzzed with noise, but she tuned it out. She just needed to reach her seat at the back of the room so she could read the rest of the files in peace. She never saw the boots. Someone stretched a pair of heavy, steel-toed combat boots right into the middle of the walkway. Harper's foot hooked behind the thick leather heel. Momentum carried her forward. She pitched headfirst toward the stone floor. The files flew out of her hands, pages scattered like snow. She threw her arms out to brace for the harsh impact. It never came. A pair of strong hands clamped around her waist. The grip was firm and sudden. The person hauled her backward, twisting her mid-air. Harper gasped. She hit a solid chest and slid down into a lap. She blinked, trying to catch her breath. She sat sideways across the legs of a very large man. He wore a dark jacket and a smug expression. "Nice catch," the man said. His voice was a deep rumble. A lazy smirk crossed his face. Harper did not blush. She did not stutter. She looked down at the offending combat boots, then back up at the man's face. He had dark hair and sharp, mocking eyes. "Your boots are a tripping hazard," Harper snapped. She pushed herself up, ignoring the heat of his hands on her waist. "Move them before someone sues you for public endangerment." The man raised an eyebrow. He did not let go right away. "You were reading while walking, in a crowded hall. I think the fault lies with you." "The aisle is for walking. Keep your giant feet under your own chair," she shot back. She smacked his hands away and stood up. She smoothed down her skirt. "You have a sharp tongue," he noted. He leaned back in his chair, looking amused. "And you have zero manners." Harper turned her back to him. She dropped to her knees and started gathering her scattered papers. The man did not offer to help. He just watched her. She shoved the confidential trade agreements back into their folders. She made sure none of the pages were missing. If the council knew she had these, they would throw her out of the summit. Or worse. She grabbed the last sheet of paper from near the man's left boot. "You should watch where you step," the man drawled from his seat. "Some wolves bite when stepped on." Harper stood up and clutched the folders to her chest again. She looked down her nose at him. "I'm not scared of a dog with a barking problem. Next time I will step on your toes on purpose." She turned around and marched up the aisle. She did not look back. She needed to get away from the arrogant jerk and focus on her stolen documents. The numbers in those files hid a secret, and Harper planned to dig it out. She found an empty chair in the back row and sat down, ignoring the loud hum of the summit around her. Chapter 2. Orik watched the woman storm away. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest. Most people lowered their heads when they spoke to the Lycan King. They trembled. They avoided eye contact. That woman had glared at him like he was a nuisance. Inside his head, Brute roared. "She disrespected us," the wolf snarled. "Tear her throat out. Show her our teeth. Make her bleed." Orik let out a quiet sigh. His inner beast was a nightmare. Brute did not understand politics or jokes. Brute only understood violence. The wolf wanted war every second of the day. He craved the taste of blood and the crunch of bone. Orik spent his entire life keeping the monster locked in a tight mental cage. "Down, boy," Orik muttered under his breath. He crossed his arms over his chest. "She is just a human. A funny one, too." "Humans are weak," Brute growled, throwing his weight against the bars of his cage. "We should crush her. We should snap her neck for speaking to a king that way." "If we kill everyone who annoys us, we won't have any subjects left," Orik reasoned, using his dry humor to push the beast back down. "Besides, she was right. I did stick my feet out." Brute huffed, pacing in Orik's mind. The wolf hated logic. Orik kept his eyes on the back row. He watched the woman sit down and open her folders. She had a sharp mind. He could see it in the way her eyes darted across the pages. She was looking for something. A council member stepped up to the podium at the front of the hall. He started reading a long, boring speech about unity and winter rations. Orik tuned the man out. He was the king of the north, but he hated these meetings. He only came to ensure none of the lower alphas started a civil war. "I want to hunt," Brute whined, scratching at Orik's skull. "This room smells like fear and cheap cologne. Let me out! Let me bite the speaker!" Orik rubbed his temple. The headaches were always worse when Brute got restless. "We are not biting the speaker. Try to relax." "I will not relax until I taste copper," the beast promised. Orik ignored the threat. He was used to the constant demands for violence. He shifted his attention back to the woman in the back row. She chewed on the end of a pen, her brow furrowed in concentration. She sat completely detached from the summit politics. He liked her fire. When she fell into his lap, she did not panic. She attacked. That took guts. Orik wondered who she belonged to. She didn't have a pack scent on her, just the faint smell of something fresh and old at the same time. He uncrossed his legs and sat up straight. The summit was scheduled to last 3 more days. He had a feeling those 3 days were going to be a lot more interesting now. If his wolf wanted a target to focus on, Orik decided he would focus on the girl with the stolen folders and the sharp tongue. Chapter 3. Harper pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. The lighting in the back of the hall was terrible, but she didn't care. She laid the stolen trade documents out on her lap, using her skirt as a desk. She cross-referenced the summit's official guest list with the delivery logs from the kitchen. Something was wrong. The math did not add up. She tapped her pen against her chin. The kitchen ordered meat from a supplier called Red Pine Farms. The invoices showed payments for 3 tons of venison and beef, but the guest list showed a sharp drop in attendance from the Western packs. They didn't need 3 tons of meat. They needed half that amount. "Where is the rest of the money going?" Harper whispered to herself. She flipped to the next page. The signature on the Red Pine invoice was sloppy. She compared it to an older document from last year. The handwriting was different. It was a fake name, a shell company. Someone was using the summit's food budget to funnel money somewhere else. Harper loved puzzles. She hated thieves who thought they were smarter than everyone else. She started circling numbers with red ink. She traced the fake supplier back to a holding account. The account belonged to someone on the Summit Council. She just needed a few more pieces of the puzzle to find out who. Up on the main stage, Orik sat in the high-backed king's chair. He looked bored out of his mind. The council members kept droning on about border patrols. Orik rested his chin on his fist. His eyes drifted across the crowd and locked onto Harper. Harper felt the weight of his stare. She looked up from her papers. The Lycan King was watching her. He didn't try to hide it. He just sat there studying her from the stage. Harper frowned. She grabbed her folders and pulled them closer to her chest, hiding the red ink marks. Did he know she stole the files? Did he care? He offered a slow, teasing smirk. Harper rolled her eyes and looked back down at her papers. She refused to play staring games with an arrogant alpha. She had real work to do. She turned to the delivery schedule. The last shipment of meat arrived this morning. If the paperwork was fake, the meat might be compromised too. Why buy from a shadow company unless you wanted to hide what you were bringing into the castle? Her stomach tightened. The summit dinner was in 1 hour. She packed her folders into her satchel. She needed to get to the dining hall before the first course was served. If the food was bad, she had to know. She stood up and slipped out the back doors. From the stage, Orik watched her leave. His smirk faded. He noticed the urgency in her step. Brute growled low in his mind, sensing the shift in her mood. Something had spooked the fearless girl. Orik decided he needed to find out what it was. Chapter 4. The dining hall was loud. Hundreds of pack leaders and their guests sat at long wooden tables. Silverware clinked against plates. Laughter bounced off the high stone ceilings. Harper took a seat near the end of a long table. She kept her satchel clamped between her feet. The air in the room was thick with roasted garlic and heavy perfumes. Through the noise and the smells, Harper picked up her own familiar scent, a clean mix of crushed mint and old paper. It grounded her. Waiters pushed large metal carts out of the kitchen. They carried giant silver platters piled high with roasted meat. The man sitting next to Harper nudged her arm. "Good, the food is here. I'm starving." He was a burly alpha from the Eastern Territories. "Enjoy," Harper said. She watched the waiter approach their table. The waiter set a platter of sliced beef down in front of the alpha. Steam rose from the meat. Harper leaned in closer. Underneath the smell of gravy and herbs, something foul hit her nose. It smelled bitter, like rotting leaves mixed with rust. She squinted at the meat. A faint, grayish powder dusted the edges of the beef. It blended in with the pepper and spices, but it did not belong there. "Looks perfect," the alpha grunted. He picked up his fork and reached for a thick slice. Harper's mind raced. The fake invoices, the shadow company, the bitter smell, the powder. It was poison. She didn't have time to yell. She didn't have time to explain her theory. She just had to stop him from taking a bite. Harper grabbed the large glass water pitcher sitting in the center of the table. She swung her arm hard. Her elbow slammed into the pitcher. It tipped over. A gallon of ice water flooded across the wooden table. It washed over the silver platter, soaking the roasted beef. It splashed right into the alpha's lap. "Hey!" the alpha roared, jumping out of his chair. Water dripped down his pants. He glared at Harper, his face turning red with rage. "What is wrong with you?" "My elbow slipped," Harper said, keeping her voice steady. She grabbed a cloth napkin and tossed it at him. "So sorry." "You ruined the whole plate," he yelled. He bared his teeth. Several other wolves at the table stood up, sensing a fight. The noise in the hall died down. People turned to stare at the commotion. Harper ignored the angry man. She looked at the soaked meat. The gray powder washed away into the water, bubbling slightly before disappearing. She was right. "I will get you a fresh plate." A waiter hurried over, trying to calm the angry alpha. "Don't bother." A deep voice cut through the tension. Harper turned around. Orik stood right behind her chair. His hands were shoved in his pockets, but his shoulders were tense. He looked at the spilled water, then at the ruined meat, and finally at Harper. His jaw was tight. His knuckles were white. He was shaking just barely. "Meeting adjourned," Orik told the angry alpha. The king's voice left no room for argument. He grabbed Harper's upper arm. His grip was like iron. "You, with me, now." Harper grabbed her satchel. She let the Lycan King pull her away from the table and out into the dark stone corridor. She knew she had just ruined dinner, but she also knew she just saved a life. Now she had to deal with the king and his shaking hands. Chapter 5. The stone corridor outside the dining hall felt like an icebox. Torches flickered in the draft, casting long, jagged shadows against the walls. Orik did not stop walking until the heavy wooden doors of the banquet room swung shut behind them. The noise of the angry summit leaders faded into a muffled hum. Orik spun around and released Harper's arm. He blocked her path back to the doors. His chest heaved. He planted his boots on the stone floor, trying to ground himself. His blood boiled. "Explain," Orik demanded. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "You ruin a peace dinner. You insult an Eastern Alpha. You make a scene in front of the entire council. Give me one good reason not to throw you out into the snow." Harper did not flinch. She adjusted the strap of her satchel on her shoulder. She tilted her head and studied him. "You should say thank you," Harper said. Orik let out a harsh, dry laugh. "Thank you? For drenching my guests in ice water?" "For stopping a murder," Harper corrected him. She took a step closer, invading his space. She pointed a finger at his chest. "I saw the meat on that platter. It had a grayish powder dusting the edges. The smell was wrong, bitter, like rust and rot. Someone poisoned the roast, Your Majesty." Orik froze. The anger in his chest shifted, replaced by a cold spike of alarm. He stared down at the small woman. She kept her chin high. She showed no fear. "Poison." Orik repeated the word. He thought about the Eastern Alpha taking a bite. The Alpha would drop dead in the center of the hall. The Eastern packs would blame the Northern hosts. War would erupt before midnight. Brute slammed against the bars of his mental cage. The wolf sensed the trap. He wanted to run back into the dining hall and rip the traitor out of the crowd. Orik squeezed his eyes shut for a second. He clamped down on the beast. It took all his willpower to keep his bones from snapping and reforming. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets so Harper would not see them shaking. "You noticed powder on a piece of meat from 3 feet away?" Orik asked, opening his eyes. He kept his tone flat, masking the struggle inside his skull. "I noticed the discrepancies in your kitchen delivery logs first," Harper said. She pulled the stolen folders out of her bag. She tapped the top page. "Your quartermaster buys from a shell company. The invoices are fake. The numbers do not add up. Someone needed a shadow supplier to sneak tainted food into this castle without drawing attention." Orik stared at the files. He recognized the red wax seal of his own council. "You stole those from my administrative table." "I borrowed them to solve a puzzle," Harper countered. "And a good thing I did. If I minded my own business, you would have a dead alpha on your floor right now. Instead of yelling at me, you need to find out who brought that powder into your home." A tremor ran down Orik's left arm. He tightened his jaw. The pressure in his head felt like a splitting ache. Brute scratched at his skull, begging for a fight. The wolf demanded a target. Harper narrowed her eyes. She put the folders back in her bag. She looked at his locked jaw. She looked at the sweat forming on his brow. She looked at his pockets where his hands vibrated with tension. "You look awful," Harper noted. "I appreciate the compliment," Orik gritted out. "Your hands are shaking," she continued, ignoring his sarcasm. "Your eyes keep flashing gold. Your shoulders are tight. You are not just angry about the dinner, you are fighting something else right now." Orik took a deep breath. He tried to project calm authority, but his control slipped. A low growl vibrated in his throat. It was not a human sound. "Back away," Orik warned her. "No," Harper said. She crossed her arms. "I read the old pack histories. I know what happens to a Lycan King when his beast gets a taste for blood. You are fighting a war inside your own head. Your wolf wants to break out and tear the dining hall apart to find the poisoner." Orik felt the truth knock the wind right out of his lungs. She saw right through his jokes and his calm facade. She saw the monster pacing in the dark. "My inner wolf is none of your business," Orik said, taking a step back. He needed space. He needed to lock the beast down. It becomes my business when we have a killer loose in the castle, Harper said. Her voice remained steady, a beacon of pure logic in the chaotic hallway. You cannot investigate this. If you go back in there and start questioning suspects, your temper will snap. You will shift. People will die. Orik knew she was right. Brute did not do interrogations. Brute did executions. So, what do you suggest? Orik asked, his voice strained. We figure this out together, Harper said. She did not blink. She offered him a path out of the madness. She stood her ground, a fragile human demanding an alliance with a monster. Chapter 6. The torchlight painted long shadows across Orik's face. He leaned against the cold stone wall, trying to let the chills seep through his shirt and cool his boiling blood. Brute whined in his head, frustrated by the lack of action. Together, Orik repeated. He let out a harsh breath. You want to team up with me. You just met me an hour ago by tripping over my boots. I tripped because you put them in my way, Harper corrected him. And yes, I want to team up. You need answers. I want to solve the puzzle. It makes sense. Orik dragged a hand down his face. The tremor in his fingers started to fade. Having a problem to solve distracted the beast. You do not understand what you are asking, Orik said. He dropped the sarcastic tone. He needed her to grasp the danger. My wolf is not like the others in that room. Brute is a nightmare. He wants to rip throats. He craves war. If I let my guard down for a single second, he will tear this castle apart. You are safer walking away right now. I am not walking away, Harper said. She did not look impressed by his warnings. She pulled a pen from her pocket and clicked it. I read the ledgers. The poison in the dining hall is just the start. Whoever set this up wants the packs to tear each other to pieces. If that happens, the violence spreads south. It hits the human towns. I will not let that happen. Orik studied her. Most humans ran from pack politics. This woman dove headfirst into the deep end. You have a lot of confidence for someone with 0 fangs, Orik noted. I have a brain, Harper countered. Fangs are useless if you do not know who to bite. That is where our deal comes in. She held up one finger. Rule 1. I lead the investigation. I track the paper trail. I find out who signed those fake invoices and who bought the poison. I do the thinking. She held up a second finger. Rule 2. You provide the muscle. You keep the guards off my back. If someone tries to stab me for asking too many questions, you step in front of the blade. You protect me. She held up a third finger. Rule 3. You keep your beast in his cage. I cannot work with a rabid dog. You use your dry humor, your sarcasm, whatever coping mechanism you need. Just hold it together until I point you at the real enemy. Orik listened to her terms. The logic was flawless. Brute calmed down a fraction, intrigued by the promise of a designated target. The wolf liked the idea of a hunt. You want me to be your bodyguard, Orik summarized, a glint of dark amusement returning to his face. I want you to be a shield, Harper said. She shoved the pen back into her pocket and held out her hand. Do we have a deal, Your Majesty? Orik looked at her outstretched hand. Her fingers were slender, ink-stained near the knuckles. She stood in a drafty corridor, surrounded by deadly shifters, offering a pact to the most dangerous alpha on the continent. He reached out and wrapped his large, calloused hand around hers. Her grip was firm. We have a deal, Orik agreed. The handshake felt like sealing a contract with a storm. Good, Harper said. She pulled her hand back and turned down the corridor. We need to move fast. The council will lock the castle down once they clear the dining hall and find the ruined meat. Where are we going? Orik asked, falling into step beside her. His long legs kept pace with her quick strides. The quartermaster's office, Harper replied, not looking back. The ledgers I stole were copies. I need the original manifest. I need to see the ink to know who forged the signatures. Orik crossed his arms. The quartermaster locks his office at sunset. The door is solid oak. The lock is heavy iron. I cannot kick it down without alerting the night patrol. I do not need you to kick it down, Harper said. I need you to stand in the hallway and make sure no one interrupts me. Orik raised an eyebrow. Are you going to ask the door nicely to open? I am going to bypass the mechanism, Harper said. She patted the leather satchel at her hip. I came prepared. Orik let out a low chuckle. The heavy burden of his crown felt a little lighter. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he was fighting his war alone. The beast in his head settled down, watching the sharp-tongued woman lead the way into the dark. Chapter 7. The northern wing of the castle was silent. Most of the guards stood watch near the dining hall, dealing with the aftermath of the spilled water and the angry Alpha. Harper used the shadows to her advantage. She moved through the corridors with practiced ease, avoiding the flickering light of the wall sconces. Orik walked behind her. He made no sound. For a huge man in heavy combat boots, he stepped like a ghost. They reached the end of a long hallway. A heavy oak door sat set back into the stone. A brass plaque read, Quartermaster and Supplies. Here, Harper whispered. She stepped up to the door and grabbed the iron handle. She pushed. It did not budge. The deadbolt was thrown. Orik leaned against the wall next to the frame. He crossed his ankles and watched her. I can go find the quartermaster and demand the key. As king, I have that right. And tip off the traitor that we are looking into the logs? Harper shook her head. No, we do this quiet. She knelt on the stone floor. She unbuckled her satchel and dug through the contents. She pulled out a small leather roll. She untied the string and revealed a row of thin metal tools. Orik tilted his head. Lockpicks. You carry thief tools to a diplomatic summit. I carry tools that solve problems, Harper corrected him. She selected a tension wrench and a small hook pick. Sometimes the problem is a locked door. She slid the tension wrench into the bottom of the keyhole. She applied a small amount of pressure with her thumb. She fed the pick into the top of the lock and closed her eyes. Orik kept his gaze on the hallway, listening for footsteps. Where did a history buff learn to break and enter? When you spend your life tracking down forgotten pack laws in restricted archives, you learn how to bypass the restrictions, Harper muttered. She nudged the first pin inside the lock. A tiny click echoed in the quiet hall. Criminal, Orik teased, the corner of his mouth curving upward. Resourceful, Harper shot back. She shifted her angle and pushed the second pin into place. Another click. Keep your eyes on the corridor, big guy. Stop watching me work. Orik turned his head, scanning the dark stone passages. Brute remained quiet, lulled by the focus of the hunt. Orik enjoyed the banter. It kept him grounded. It reminded him he was human. A final, loud clack sounded from the door. The iron handle dropped. Harper stood up and put her tools away. She pushed the oak door open. The hinges groaned a little, but the noise was minimal. After you, Harper said, gesturing into the dark room. Orik stepped inside first, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom. The office smelled like ink, stale tobacco, and dust. Tall filing cabinets lined the walls. A heavy mahogany desk dominated the center of the room. Harper followed him in and shut the door behind them. She pulled a small penlight from her pocket. The narrow beam of light cut through the dark. She walked straight to the desk. Start checking the filing cabinets, Harper ordered, shining her light on the messy stacks of paper covering the desk. Look for anything marked with this month's date. Orik walked over to the metal cabinets. You give a lot of orders for a human. You agreed to follow my lead, Harper reminded him, opening the top drawer of the desk. Rule number 1, remember? I remember, Orik grunted, pulling a heavy drawer open. He rifled through the folders. Nothing but winter coat requisitions in here. Harper ignored him, her focus unbreakable. She flipped through ledgers and loose invoices. She pulled a thick, leather-bound book from under a stack of maps. She opened it to the center. Found it, Harper whispered. She ran her finger down a column of numbers. The Master Delivery Manifest. Orik walked over to the desk. He looked over her shoulder, his chest hovering inches from her back. He did not touch her, but Harper felt the heat radiating off him. "Look at this signature," Harper said, pointing her light at a strange symbol stamped next to the ink. The person hiding behind Red Pine Farms did not sign their name. They used a council cipher stamp. I recognize the wax imprint, but I do not know whose personal seal it is. Orik leaned in. Only the inner circle has access to those seals. Someone on the council. "Exactly," Harper said, closing the book. "This proves the traitor is high-ranking, but it hides their identity. To match this cipher to a name, we need the original Summit Charter documents." "Where do we find those?" Orik asked, his voice hardening. "The archives," Harper said. "The old charters and holding records are stored in the basement vaults. We need to go down there." Chapter 8. The basement archives felt like a tomb. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of rotting paper and damp stone. Rows of towering wooden shelves stretched into the gloom, packed tight with centuries of pack history and financial records. Harper walked down the center aisle, her penlight sweeping over the dusty boxes. Orik stayed close to her side. His posture was rigid. He scanned the dark corners, his senses on high alert. "The financial records from the last decade should be in Section 4, Harper whispered, shining her light on a brass plaque at the end of an aisle. "Make it fast," Orik said, his voice a low rumble. "We are sitting ducks down here." Harper turned down the narrow row. She counted the boxes, searching for the right year. She reached out to pull a heavy cardboard container from the middle shelf. A sharp scrape of leather against stone echoed through the silence. Orik reacted before Harper even processed the sound. He grabbed her shoulder and shoved her hard behind a solid oak pillar. "Stay put," Orik commanded. Two figures stepped out from the shadows at the end of the aisle. They wore dark cloaks, their faces hidden behind thick scarves. They did not smell like summit guards. They smelled like wet dog and cheap ale. Rogues. "The king is not supposed to be down here," the first rogue rasped. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a long, curved hunting knife. The blade caught the dim light. Orik's eyes locked onto the weapon. The metal had a dull, white sheen. Silver. "I could say the same about you," Orik said. He rolled his shoulders, settling into a fighting stance. Brute slammed against the front of his mind, screaming for release. The wolf wanted to shift. He wanted to tear the rogues into pieces and paint the shelves with their blood. Orik clenched his teeth. If he shifted now, he would lose control. He would destroy the archives and maybe Harper in the process. He had to fight human. The first rogue lunged forward, swinging the silver knife in a wide arc. Orik ducked under the blade. He stepped inside the rogue's guard and delivered a brutal punch to the man's ribs. Bone cracked. The rogue stumbled back, gasping for air. The second rogue attacked from the side, aiming a heavy kick at Orik's knee. Orik pivoted on his heel, catching the rogue's ankle. He twisted hard and threw the man into a wooden shelf. The shelf splintered, sending boxes crashing to the floor. "Watch the silver!" Harper yelled from behind the pillar. The first rogue recovered and slashed the knife in a fast, tight cross. Orik leaned back, but the space in the aisle was too narrow. The silver blade caught his left forearm. The metal sliced through his jacket and bit deep into his flesh. A burning, toxic pain flared up Orik's arm. Silver did not just cut a werewolf, it scorched the nerves and poisoned the blood. Orik let out a sharp hiss of pain. Brute roared in agony. The wolf demanded vengeance. Orik's eyes flashed a brilliant, violent gold. Orik ignored the burn. He stepped forward, grabbing the rogue's wrist with his good hand. He twisted the arm until the joint popped. The rogue dropped the knife. Orik followed up with a crushing blow to the jaw, knocking the man unconscious. The second rogue scrambled out of the broken shelf and sprinted toward the stairs, abandoning his partner. Orik did not chase him. The fight was over. Orik leaned against the oak pillar, breathing hard. He clamped his right hand over the gash on his left arm. Dark blood seeped through his fingers. The smell of copper filled the stale air. Harper stepped out from her hiding spot. She looked at the unconscious rogue on the floor, then at Orik. She did not scream. She did not panic. She walked over to him. "Move your hand." "It is a silver burn," Orik grunted, his jaw tight with pain. "It does not heal fast." "I know," Harper said. She reached down and grabbed the hem of her petticoat. She pulled hard, ripping a long strip of clean white cotton from the underskirt. Orik watched her, confused by her calm focus. Brute watched her too, the beast's rage pausing to observe the human. Harper stepped right into his space. She grabbed his injured arm. She did not ask for permission. She peeled his hand away from the cut. She inspected the wound with a critical eye, then wrapped the torn fabric tight around his forearm, tying a firm knot to stop the bleeding. "Sit down," Harper ordered, pushing on his uninjured shoulder. "Breathe. Keep pressure on the knot." Orik sank down onto an overturned box. He stared at the makeshift bandage. The pain receded, replaced by a strange sense of awe. She had just watched a brutal fight, smelled blood, and seen his eyes turn gold. Yet she stood over him, barking orders and patching him up with her own clothes. The battle-hungry monster in his head stopped pacing. Brute huffed, surprised by the sheer nerve of the woman. "We need to find that box," Harper said, turning her attention back to the shelves, "before the other one comes back with friends." Orik let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. He had found a partner immune to the fear of monsters. Chapter 9. Orik sat on the wooden box. The basement air felt thick. The silver poison burned through his veins like battery acid. The white cotton strip around his left forearm soaked up the dark blood, but it did not stop the fire. Brute woke up fully. The pain stripped away Orik's mental barriers. The wolf did not care about the politics of the summit. The beast only cared about the insult. An enemy drew their blood. The monster demanded a toll in flesh. Orik gripped his right knee. His knuckles turned white. His breathing shifted into a ragged, wet sound. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and warp as his vision changed. "Hey," Harper said. Her voice cut through the ringing in his ears. Orik looked up. His eyes did not hold their usual dark, mocking gaze. They glowed a fierce, luminous gold. His canine teeth elongated, pressing against his bottom lip. A deep, unnatural rumble vibrated in his chest, shaking the dust off the cold stone floor. Most humans would run. The Eastern Alpha from the dining hall would have bared his own throat in submission. Harper did not step back. She held her ground. She looked at his glowing eyes, then down at the ruined, shattered shelf beside him. She saw the lethal predator taking over, but her calm expression never wavered. "You are losing focus," she stated, no tremor in her tone, no fear. "Run!" Orik forced the word out. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "He wants to hunt." "The only thing down here to hunt is an unconscious thug," Harper replied, pointing her penlight at the rogue on the floor. "And he is not worth the effort. Look at me, Orik." The sound of his name, spoken with such calm authority, confused the beast. Brute paused. "Keep the pressure on that knot," she ordered, pointing to his injured left arm. "The silver is fighting your healing factor. If you shift now, the poison will pump straight into your heart. You will die before you reach the stairs." Logic. Cold, hard logic. It acted like ice water on the wolf's rage. Orik blinked. The gold in his eyes flickered, fighting the human brown for dominance. "Breathe in through your nose," Harper instructed. She knelt in front of him, keeping her hands visible. "Count the wooden planks on this box. Do something to ground your mind." Orik sucked in a harsh breath. The scent of damp stone and old parchment filled his lungs. He focused on the rough texture of the wood under his right hand. The burning in his left arm remained, but the urge to tear the room apart receded. Brute retreated, huffing in disappointment. The wolf respected strength, and the human woman possessed a strange, unyielding kind of power. She commanded a king with a penlight and a steady stare. Orik dropped his head, staring at the floor. The gold faded. "You have a dangerous habit of giving orders to predators." "Only when they act like stubborn children," Harper said. She stood up and turned her attention to the scattered mess of the broken shelf. Cardboard boxes lay ripped open. Dust drifted in the beam of light. "Help me find the charter records. We are running out of time." Orik managed a rough, exhausted grin. His left arm throbbed, useless and heavy. He used his right hand to push himself up. He kept his distance, scanning the fallen debris. Harper sifted through a pile of spilled ledgers. She pushed aside a broken plank and unearthed a heavy, iron-bound lockbox. The lid bore the crest of the Unified Council. "This is it," she said, hauling the box out of the wreckage. She set it on a sturdy table at the end of the aisle. The box featured a complex dial mechanism instead of a standard keyhole. "The original founding charters. The cipher keys are inside." "Can you open it?" Orik asked, walking over. He kept his left arm tucked close to his chest to avoid jarring the wound. Harper studied the dials. "Not down here. The rogue who ran away will bring the guards. If they catch us with this box and a bleeding assassin, we take the blame for the poison." Orik nodded. "My quarters. The royal wing has private access. We can hide there." Harper shoved the iron box into her leather satchel. The bag bulged, straining the seams. She looked at the unconscious rogue, then at the silver knife gleaming on the stone floor. "Leave him," Orik said, reading her mind. "Let the council clean up their own trash. We have a puzzle to solve." They moved toward the stairs. Orik took the lead, his right hand ready for a fight. They climbed the spiraling stone steps in silence. The castle corridors above remained quiet, but tension hung in the air. The summit was no longer a political headache. It was a war zone, and they held the only map. Chapter 10. The royal quarters smelled of wood smoke and polished leather. Orik kicked the heavy oak door shut behind them and locked the deadbolt. He bypassed the large sitting area and headed straight for the drinks cabinet. He grabbed an unopened bottle of red wine with his good right hand. He popped the cork using the edge of the mahogany counter, ignoring the need for a glass. He took a long, steady drink. The alcohol did nothing for the silver burn in his left arm, but it helped wash the metallic taste of adrenaline out of his mouth. Harper claimed the large dining table in the center of the room. She dropped her heavy satchel onto the polished surface. She pulled the iron lockbox out and set it under the chandelier light. "Sit down before you fall down," Harper told him, pulling a chair out for herself. Orik dragged a chair out with his foot and sat across from her. He rested his bandaged left arm on the table. The white cotton strip from her petticoat showed a dark, spreading stain, but the bleeding had slowed. "I am fine," Orik grunted. "You look like a corpse," Harper countered. She pulled her lockpicks out of her pocket and bent over the iron box. "Drink your wine. Let me work." Orik watched her, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. She slid a thin metal hook into the side of the dial mechanism. She worked with quiet efficiency, tuning out the rest of the world. "Those rogues knew we were in the basement," Orik said, breaking the silence. "The archives are restricted. Someone told them where to find us." "The same person who authorized the fake meat delivery," Harper agreed. She nudged a gear inside the lock. A soft click echoed in the room. "The inside man. He hired the rogues to plant the poison, then sent them to the basement to destroy the financial records. We just happened to get there first." "A council member," Orik mused, taking another drink from the bottle. "Someone with the authority to bypass the summit guards. Someone who wants the northern and eastern packs to slaughter each other." "War is profitable if you hold the right cards," Harper said. She twisted her tension wrench. A loud, solid thud came from the iron box. The internal latches released. Harper pushed the heavy lid open. Inside rested a stack of ancient, yellowed scrolls and a velvet pouch. She ignored the scrolls and opened the pouch. She dumped the contents onto the table. Dozens of brass stamps spilled out. Each stamp bore a unique, intricate geometric pattern. The council's ciphers. Harper pulled her stolen folders from her bag. She opened the book they found in the quartermaster's office, the ledger with the fake signature and the wax seal. She set the book flat on the table and began comparing the brass stamps to the wax imprint. Orik leaned forward, ignoring the throb in his arm. He watched her sort through the brass pieces. She moved fast, discarding the ones that did not match the sharp hooks and curved lines of the wax seal. "Got it," Harper declared. She picked up a heavy brass stamp. The pattern matched the wax seal flawlessly. She flipped the stamp over. Engraved on the back of the brass handle was a name. Harper stared at the metal. Her expression tightened. She slid the stamp across the polished table toward Orik. Orik picked it up with his right hand. He read the engraved name. A cold, dark fury settled in his stomach. The jokes vanished. The dry humor dissolved. Elder Wren. "The lead peacekeeper," Orik whispered. The irony tasted like poison. "The man who wrote the Unity Treaty. The man who preaches nonviolence to the entire continent." "He is playing everyone," Harper said. She packed the stamps back into the pouch. "He creates the threat of war, then steps in to offer a solution. But why? He already has power." "He wants a monopoly," Orik said, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. "Silver weapons are banned across the territories. The council confiscates them. Wren controls the confiscation vaults. If war breaks out, he can sell those seized weapons to the highest bidder." Harper nodded, piecing the final parts of the puzzle together. "He poisons the Eastern Alpha to frame the North. The packs go to war. He supplies the silver. He gets rich, and the rest of you bleed out in the snow." "We tell the council," Orik stated, gripping the brass stamp. "We show them the ledger and the cipher." "No," Harper argued. "He will claim we forged it. He has decades of trust built up. You have a reputation for a short temper and a violent wolf. The council will side with the peacekeeper over the beast." Orik knew she was right. Politics favored the liar over the monster. "Then we force him to show his hand," Harper said. A sharp, brilliant light shined in her eyes. "We lay a trap." Chapter 11. Morning light crept through the high windows of the royal quarters. The storm outside broke, leaving a fresh layer of snow over the northern mountains. Inside the room, Harper and Orik finalized their plan. Orik changed his ruined shirt for a clean black button-down. He rolled the sleeves up, keeping the white cotton bandage on his left arm hidden under his dark jacket. He splashed cold water on his face to wash away the exhaustion. The silver still burned, but he forced the pain into a dark corner of his mind. Brute stayed quiet, focused on the upcoming hunt. "Review the steps," Harper said. She stood near the door, her satchel slung across her shoulder. "I call an emergency assembly in the Great Hall." Orik recited the plan. "I tell the council that my guards killed an assassin in the basement archives last night." "And the bait?" Harper prompted. "I tell them the assassin carried a detailed ledger," Orik continued. "A ledger that lists the names of his co-conspirators. I announce that I locked this ledger in the central council chamber, and we will read it together at noon." "Perfect," Harper said. "Wren will panic. He knows he hired those rogues. He cannot risk a confession ledger existing. He will try to steal it before noon." "The council chamber has 3 entrances," Orik pointed out. "I cannot guard them all without drawing attention. If he sees my men, he will abort." "He won't see your men," Harper said, tapping her fingers against the strap of her bag. "Because your men will guard the main hall. I will guard the ledger." Orik frowned. "You are human. If Wren catches you in that room, he will snap your neck." "He will not catch me," Harper countered. "The chamber has an arched ceiling with exposed wooden rafters. I will climb up before the assembly starts. I will watch the room from above. When Wren breaks in to steal the fake ledger, I have my proof." Orik did not like the idea of putting her in the crosshairs, but her logic remained flawless. They needed a witness, and she was the only person he trusted in a castle full of traitors. "You stay high," Orik ordered, his voice taking on a commanding rumble. "Do not engage him. You get the visual confirmation and you wait for me." "Deal," Harper agreed. They left the royal quarters and split up in the main corridor. Orik headed toward the Great Hall to play the role of the oblivious king. Harper slipped through the side passages, making her way to the central council chamber. The chamber sat empty. Dust motes danced in the morning light filtering through the stained glass windows. A large, round oak table dominated the floor. Harper locked the main doors from the inside. She grabbed a heavy, leather-bound book from a side shelf, a simple history text, and placed it right in the center of the round table. The bait. She moved to the back corner of the room. A tall stone fireplace offered a perfect ladder. She wedged her boots into the masonry joints and climbed. She reached the thick wooden crossbeams supporting the ceiling. She hauled herself up and shimmied across the rough timber until she hovered directly over the round table. The vantage point offered a clear view of all 3 doors. She lay flat against the wood, blending into the shadows. The air up there tasted stale, but she kept her breathing slow and steady. An hour passed. The distant sound of the great hall assembly drifted through the stone walls. Orik was playing his part. He fed the council the lie about the captured ledger. Harper waited. Her muscles cramped against the hard wood, but she did not move. A soft click echoed in the quiet chamber. Harper stopped breathing. She peered over the edge of the rafter. The side door, the one leading to the servant corridors, creaked open. The hinges made zero noise, oiled for stealth. A shadow slipped into the room. The trap worked. The mouse came for the cheese. Harper narrowed her eyes and waited for the traitor to step into the light. Chapter 12. The figure moved with practiced silence. He wore a dark, heavy cloak that obscured his build. He hugged the perimeter of the room, avoiding the patches of sunlight cast by the stained glass windows. Harper watched from the rafters. She kept her hands flat against the rough wood. She did not dare blink. The intruder stopped near the edge of the round oak table. He scanned the room, making sure the chamber remained empty. Satisfied, he reached up and pulled the dark hood back from his head. Silver hair caught the ambient light. A neat, trimmed beard framed a face marked by decades of political smiles. Elder Wren. Harper felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Orik was right. The man looked nothing like a villain. He looked like a grandfather. He looked like the voice of reason. But his eyes darted toward the book on the table with desperate, greedy intent. Wren stepped into the light. He approached the bait. He reached inside his cloak and pulled out a long, narrow object wrapped in dark cloth. Harper leaned an inch closer, straining to see. Wren unwrapped the cloth, revealing a polished silver dagger. The metal gleamed with a toxic white sheen. It was identical to the blade that cut Orik in the archives. Wren set the dagger on the table. He grabbed the heavy history book with both hands. He flipped the cover open, expecting to find a list of names and treasonous plots. He stared at the first page. A map of the old territories stared back at him. He flipped the page. A chapter on agricultural trade routes. Wren froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He dropped the book onto the oak table. It landed with a loud, hollow thud. He realized the truth. There was no confession ledger. The king lied to the assembly. The entire announcement was a snare, and Wren walked right into the center of it. Clever dog, Wren hissed into the empty room. His voice dropped the gentle, diplomatic tone. It sounded sharp and venomous. Harper pieced the final motive together from her perch. Wren did not just want to sell weapons, he wanted total control. If the northern and eastern packs wiped each other out, the unified council would step in to govern the ruined territories. As lead peacekeeper, Wren would rule the ashes. He would control the land, the trade, and the silver. Wren snatched the silver dagger off the table. He moved toward the servant door, intent on escaping before Orik arrived to spring the trap. Harper needed to slow him down. If Wren vanished into the hidden corridors, he could rally his hired rogues and launch a full assault on the castle before Orik could expose him. She reached into her satchel. She grabbed the empty iron lockbox, having safely pocketed the brass cipher stamps earlier. She aimed for the space right in front of the servant door. She let go of the box. The iron container plummeted 20 feet. It slammed into the stone floor with a deafening metallic crash. Ren jumped backward, startled by the sudden noise. He whipped his head up, scanning the ceiling. "Guards!" Ren shouted, covering his tracks with immediate deception. He pointed his dagger at the rafters. "Assassin in the chamber!" The main doors of the council chamber rattled. Someone kicked them from the outside. The heavy wood splintered. Orik burst into the room. He did not bother with the lock. He simply broke the door off its hinges. He took one look at Ren holding the silver dagger and one look at the iron box on the floor. Orik stepped fully into the room, blocking the main exit. His dark eyes locked onto the peacekeeper. "Going somewhere, Elder?" Orik asked. His voice carried a lethal, quiet promise. Ren gripped the dagger. He dropped the act. The grandfatherly mask slipped away, revealing the ruthless ambition underneath. The trap caught the traitor, but the cornered rat still had fangs. Harper watched from above. The puzzle was solved. The brains did their job. Now it was time for the brawn. Chapter 13. Orik stood in the broken doorway, his right hand balled into a fist. His left arm hung stiff at his side, the silver poison burning a steady rhythm into his nerves. He did not step further into the council chamber. He calculated the distance to the peacekeeper. Ren gripped the silver dagger tight. The grandfatherly mask vanished. A cornered rat always showed its teeth. The elder glanced at Orik, then up at the wooden rafters where Harper hid, and finally at the open servant door behind him. Ren knew he could not beat a Lycan King in a straight fight, even a wounded one. "Guards!" Ren shouted again, his voice echoing off the high stone ceiling. "Treason!" Ren did not attack. Instead, he grabbed a tall iron brazier filled with hot coals and burning oil. He swung the heavy stand toward the wall. The brazier crashed into a row of ancient, dry tapestries. Oil splashed across the fabric. Flames erupted in an instant, roaring up the wall and catching the wooden trim. Orik lunged forward, but Ren threw himself backward through the servant door. The heavy wood slammed shut. A heavy iron deadbolt clicked into place on the other side. Smoke filled the chamber fast. The dry tapestries acted like kindling. The fire spread to the banners hanging near the ceiling, licking at the wooden crossbeams. "Harper!" Orik yelled, coughing as the thick black smoke stung his lungs. "I am up here!" Harper called out. Her voice sounded strained. Orik looked up. The fire crept along the rafter right next to her hiding spot. The heat radiated down to the floor. The round oak table in the center of the room caught a falling ember and burst into flames, consuming the fake ledger book. "Climb down the fireplace stone," Orik ordered. He stepped back from the burning table, keeping his weight balanced. He kept his injured left arm tucked close to his chest. Harper scrambled backward along the thick beam. She reached the stone chimney. She wedged her boots into the masonry cracks and started her descent. The heat scorched the air, making it hard to breathe. Halfway down, a burning banner detached from the ceiling and fell right toward her. Harper let go of the stone. She dropped the last 10 feet. Orik stepped in. He reached out with his good right arm and caught her around the waist. The impact jolted his body, sending a fresh spike of agony through his left shoulder, but he did not drop her. He set her feet on the floor. "The main doors are blocked," Harper coughed, pointing to the hallway where Orik had entered. Shouts echoed from the corridor. Ren's hired guards were coming. "We are not using the hallway," Orik grunted. He grabbed her satchel strap with his right hand and pulled her toward the far end of the chamber. Tall, heavy oak doors stood at the back of the room, leading out to the external courtyard. Orik let go of her bag. He backed up 2 steps. He planted his left foot, lifted his right leg, and drove his combat boot hard into the center of the double doors. The heavy iron lock groaned. Orik kicked a second time. The thick wood splintered around the hinges. The doors blew open, letting a rush of crisp winter air into the burning room. "Move!" Orik shouted. Harper snatched her satchel off the floor just as Orik shoved her through the broken doorway. They sprinted out into the snow. The bitter cold hit them like a wall, a sharp contrast to the furnace behind them. The castle alarms started to ring, a frantic, high-pitched clanging that carried over the mountain winds. Harper kept running, her boots crunching in the deep snow. Orik stayed right behind her, acting as a shield. They reached the edge of the courtyard just as a deafening crack split the air. Harper stopped and looked back. The wooden rafters of the council chamber gave way. The roof collapsed inward, sending a towering pillar of sparks and ash into the dark winter sky. The fire illuminated the courtyard in harsh, flickering orange light. Armed guards spilled out of the side entrances, shouting orders and drawing weapons. "Into the trees," Orik commanded, pushing her shoulder. "They will search the perimeter. We need cover." They plunged into the dark forest lining the castle grounds. The snow grew deeper, dragging at their ankles. Orik kept a brutal pace, ignoring the burn of the silver in his veins. They left the burning chamber and the traitor behind, stepping into the freezing unknown. Chapter 14. The northern wind howled through the pine trees. Harper tripped over a buried root, catching herself on a rough tree trunk before she hit the snow. Her chest heaved. The adrenaline from the fire started to fade, leaving her shaking from the bitter cold. "Keep moving," Orik muttered from the shadows behind her. His voice lacked its usual smooth hum. It sounded ragged. "Where?" Harper asked, her teeth chattering. She pulled her thin sweater tight around her chest. The petticoat she ripped earlier left her legs exposed to the biting chill. "Half a mile north," Orik replied. "There is an old groundskeeper's cabin, abandoned. No patrols go out that far." They pushed through the snow for another 20 minutes. The castle alarms faded into a distant, muffled ring. Harper's hands went numb. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other. A small, square shape emerged from the dark tree line. The cabin sat nestled between two towering pines. The roof sagged in the middle, and the front windows lacked glass, but it offered 4 walls and a door. Orik kicked the front door open. It scraped against the warped floorboards. They stepped inside. The cabin smelled like dry rot and dirt. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, pale beams across the empty room. A stone hearth sat in the corner, filled with old ashes, but they had no wood and no way to start a fire without drawing attention. Harper dropped her satchel onto the floor. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the violent shivering. The cold cut right through her clothes. Orik walked over to her. He unbuttoned his dark jacket with his right hand. He slid it off his shoulders, moving his injured left arm with careful, stiff precision. He draped the heavy coat over Harper's shoulders. The jacket swallowed her. It held his body heat, a sudden, welcome rush of warmth. "You need this more than I do," Harper protested, trying to shrug it off. "You are bleeding. The silver slows your healing." "I run hotter than a human," Orik dismissed her concern. He walked over to the far wall and slid down until he sat on the dusty floorboards. He leaned his head back against the wood. "Keep the coat." Harper pulled the lapels tight. She sat down on a rotting wooden crate across from him. The moonlight illuminated his face. He looked terrible. Dark circles rimmed his eyes. The white cotton bandage around his left arm was soaked dark red, the blood freezing in the cold air. "He thinks we died in the fire," Harper said, trying to focus on the plan instead of the freezing temperature. "Wren will tell the council that the assassin trapped us." "Let him talk," Orik grunted. He closed his eyes, his jaw locked. Harper watched him. The playful, sarcastic king was gone. The man sitting on the floor looked like a soldier fighting a war nobody else could see. His right hand gripped his knee, his knuckles stark white. "Is it bad right now?" Harper asked quietly. Orik opened his eyes. A faint ring of gold pulsed around his pupils. "The pain wakes him up. Brute does not understand strategy or waiting. He smells my blood. He wants to hunt the man who spilled it." "You are keeping him locked down," Harper pointed out. "You are doing a good job." Orik let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You think this is a good job? I spend every second of my life building mental walls. I use jokes. I use sarcasm. I play the bored king to keep the monster sedated. It never stops, Harper. The hunger never fades. It feels like a sharp blade twisting inside my chest over and over, demanding release. Harper listened. He did not ask for pity. He just stated a brutal fact. Most alphas embrace their wolves, Orik continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. They let the beast drive. If I do that, Brute will slaughter half the summit. He enjoys the crunch of bone. He likes the taste of copper. If I let go for 1 minute, I become the nightmare everyone thinks I am. He looked away, staring into the dark hearth. The silver makes the walls weak. I am tired of fighting him. Harper did not offer hollow comfort. She did not tell him it would be okay. She understood the weight of his reality. She sat in the dark, wearing his coat, and realized the Lycan King needed a new strategy. Chapter 15. The wind rattled the loose boards of the cabin. Harper crossed her arms over the oversized coat. She let Orik's words hang in the freezing air. He viewed his inner wolf as a terminal disease, a curse he had to manage until it eventually broke him. You are doing it wrong, Harper stated. Orik turned his head. The golden ring in his eyes flared, reacting to the challenge in her tone. Excuse me? You treat Brute like a prisoner, Harper said, her voice steady and clear. You lock him in a dark box in your mind. You ignore him until he bangs on the door, and then you just add another lock. No wonder he is angry all the time. He is a rabid beast, Orik growled. If I let him out of the box, people die. Of course they do, Harper agreed, not backing down. He is a predator, a weapon. But a sword sitting on a table is not evil. It is just sharp. The danger comes from the hand that swings it. Orik stared at her. He expected her to soothe him. Instead, she offered cold, clinical analysis. You are the king, Harper continued. She stood up from the crate. The heavy jacket hung past her knees. She walked over and stood right in front of him. A smart king does not bury his best weapon in the dirt. A smart king points that weapon at his enemies. She knelt in front of him. She did not reach out to touch him. She kept her hands visible, respecting the predator. Look at me, Harper commanded. Orik met her gaze. The gold in his eyes fought the brown, turning his irises into a volatile storm. Brute pushed against the mental bars, intrigued by the human who did not shrink away. I am not talking to Orik right now, Harper said. She pitched her voice lower, speaking with ironclad authority. I am talking to the wolf. Orik's breath hitched. A deep, unnatural rumble vibrated in his chest. His canine teeth elongated slightly. Brute surfaced, looking through the king's eyes. You want to fight, Harper said to the beast. You want blood for the insult in the archives. You want to tear the traitor apart. I understand. The rumbling in Orik's chest smoothed out, shifting from a threat to a sound of acknowledgement. The wolf listened. But you cannot attack blindly, Harper instructed the beast. If you tear through the castle guards, you hurt your own pack. You look like a mindless dog. A true alpha hunts with purpose. You focus on the prey. Brute tilted Orik's head. The golden eyes locked onto Harper, unblinking. The prey is Elder Wren, Harper stated, giving the wolf a target. She gave him a name. He ordered the silver blade. He ordered the poison. I will find him for you. I will put him right in front of you. But you have to wait for my signal. The cabin fell silent, save for the wind outside. Harper held the stare of a monster, negotiating a truce in the dead of winter. If you wait, Harper promised, I will let you off the leash. You will get your hunt. Orik sucked in a sudden, sharp breath. The gold receded, leaving his dark brown eyes wide and shocked. The pressure in his skull vanished. The constant, agonizing pounding of Brute fighting the cage stopped. The wolf did not disappear. It simply sat down. It accepted the terms. It had a purpose now, a focused hunt, and it was willing to wait for the brilliant human to spring the trap. He agreed, Orik whispered, stunned. He looked at his shaking right hand. The mental war ended. A strange, calm clarity washed over him. He actually listened to you. Logic works on everyone, Harper said, standing back up. She adjusted the oversized coat on her shoulders. You just had to stop treating him like a parasite and start treating him like a soldier. Orik looked up at her. The exhaustion faded from his face, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. He pushed himself off the floor using his good arm. He stood tall, the king and the beast finally acting as one unified force. All right, lead strategist, Orik said, a hint of his dry humor returning. How do we put the prey in front of the wolf? Chapter 16. Orik walked to the back corner of the cabin. He knelt and dug his right hand into the dirt, feeling around the edges of the rotting floorboards. His fingers hooked under a rusted iron ring. He pulled hard. A heavy trapdoor groaned, lifting to reveal a dark, narrow stone staircase plunging into the earth. Smuggler's tunnel, Orik explained, gesturing to the stairs. My grandfather built it. It connects the old groundskeeper lands directly to the royal wing of the castle, bypasses the main gates and the courtyard patrols. Convenient, Harper said. She grabbed her satchel and walked over to the opening. Watch your step. It is steep, Orik warned. They descended into the dark. The air in the tunnel felt damp and smelled of wet earth and old stone. Orik took the lead, using his right hand to guide them along the rough wall. His left arm remained tucked against his chest. The silver wound throbbed with every step, but the mental clarity from his truce with Brute made the physical pain easier to ignore. The final summit gala starts in 3 hours, Orik said, his voice echoing in the tight space. The council will gather in the grand ballroom to sign the winter treaties. And Ren will be right in the middle of it, Harper added, following close behind him. He will play the grieving peacekeeper. He will tell the Pax that the king died in a tragic fire, and he will suggest taking temporary control of the northern forces to maintain stability. He will secure his power, Orik agreed, unless dead people walk into the ballroom. Walking in is not enough, Harper corrected him. If we just show up and point fingers, he denies it. He turns the council against us. We need to present the evidence publicly, where he cannot hide or twist the narrative. They reached the end of the tunnel. A solid stone wall blocked their path. Orik found a hidden lever in the brickwork and pushed it. The wall ground open, revealing the familiar, polished interior of the royal quarters. They stepped into the room. Orik sealed the secret door behind them. The quarters remained empty. The castle staff believed the king was currently burning in the council chamber ruins. Harper walked over to the dining table and dropped her satchel. She pulled out the forged ledgers and the brass cipher stamp they recovered from the iron box. This is our ammunition, Harper said, tapping the ledger. I will take the center microphone before the treaty signing begins. I will read the fake meat invoices out loud. I will explain the shadow company, the silver weapons, and the poison. I will show the council the cipher match. Orik walked over to the drinks cabinet. He poured a glass of water with his good hand and drank it down. Ren will not let you finish the speech. The moment you start talking, he will realize he is exposed. He will call his rogue mercenaries into the ballroom. That is when the hunt begins, Harper said, turning to look at him. You keep the rogues off me. You let the beast handle the muscle. I handle the crowd. Orik nodded. The plan was dangerous, relying on split-second timing and brute force. But it was the only way to tear Ren's mask off in front of the entire continent. You cannot go into the ballroom looking like that, Orik noted, looking at her dirt-stained sweater and the ripped petticoat hanging past the hem of her skirt. The guards will stop you at the door before you even reach the microphone. Harper looked down at her ruined clothes. She frowned. I left my suitcase in the guest wing. I cannot go back there without being seen. You don't have to, Orik said. He walked over to a heavy mahogany wardrobe in the corner of the room. He pulled the doors open with his right hand. Inside hung dozens of formal garments, gifts from visiting packs over the years. He pushed aside the heavy winter cloaks and pulled out a hanger holding a gown. The fabric was a deep, shimmering midnight blue. It caught the low light of the room, looking like a piece of the night sky. The cut was elegant, sharp, and commanding. He held the dress out to her. "Wear this. Walk in there looking like you own the castle. They will part the crowd for you." Harper took the hanger. She felt the heavy, high-quality silk. She looked at Orik, then down at the midnight blue gown. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Get your suit on, Your Majesty," Harper said. "We have a party to crash." Chapter 17. Harper stood in the attached washroom of the royal quarters. The marble floor felt cold against her bare feet. She turned on the brass faucet and let the water run until it turned freezing cold. She cupped her hands and splashed the water over her face, washing away the black ash and soot from the council chamber fire. She grabbed a thick white towel and patted her skin dry. The adrenaline still hummed in her veins. She looked at herself in the wide mirror over the sink. Her hair was a tangled mess. She grabbed a comb from the vanity and worked the knots out, twisting her hair up into a tight, sharp knot at the back of her head. She cleaned her glasses on the edge of the towel and slid them back onto her nose. She turned her attention to the dress Orik gave her. The midnight blue silk pooled over her hands. It felt heavy and expensive. She stripped off her ruined, dirt-stained sweater and the torn remnants of her petticoat. She slipped the gown over her head. The silk cascaded down her body, fitting her shape with surprising ease. The dress featured a high neckline and long, elegant sleeves that hid her bruises. The skirt flowed to the floor, shimmering like a clear night sky every time she moved. She found a small black velvet clutch sitting on a shelf in the wardrobe. She ripped the forged pages out of the thick leather ledger, folded them up tightly, and tucked them inside the clutch alongside the brass cipher stamp. The clasp snapped shut with a satisfying click. It was her weapon. Harper walked back into the main sitting room. Orik stood near the drinks cabinet. He had found a dark charcoal suit jacket. He wore it over his clean black button-down shirt. The dark fabric hid the bulk of his bandages, but Harper noticed the stiff way he held his left shoulder. The silver poison still ravaged his system. He could not use his left arm for heavy lifting or fighting, but he refused to show the weakness on his face. He turned around when he heard her footsteps on the hardwood floor. Orik stopped moving. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in the midnight blue silk, the sharp twist of her hair, and the calm determination on her face. The gold ring around his pupils flared for a split second, a silent hum of approval from the beast inside his head. Brute recognized a fellow predator getting ready for a hunt. "The dress fits," Orik noted. His voice carried a low, steady rumble. "It feels like armor," Harper said. She gripped the black velvet clutch in her right hand. "Are you ready for this? The council will demand answers the second they see you breathing." "Let them demand," Orik said. He rolled his shoulders, testing the limits of his injured arm. "I am done playing the bored king. The fire changed the rules. Ren wants a war, and we will give him one right in the center of his own gala." They left the royal quarters and walked down the long, carpeted hallways of the upper levels. The castle felt empty up here. All the guards and staff were downstairs, focused on the smoldering ruins of the council chamber and the chaos in the grand ballroom. They reached the ornate marble balcony overlooking the ballroom. Harper stepped up to the stone railing and looked down at the crowd. Hundreds of pack leaders, diplomats, and wealthy elites packed the floor. Tension radiated from the crowd. People spoke in hushed, frantic whispers. The string quartet in the corner played a low, mournful tune that did nothing to soothe the panic. At the front of the room stood a raised wooden stage. A single microphone sat in the center. Elder Ren stood behind the podium. He wore a crisp white suit, standing out like a beacon of purity against the dark, anxious crowd. His silver hair caught the chandelier light. He looked somber. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Look at him," Orik sneered, standing close to Harper's side. He is getting ready to deliver my eulogy. He is getting ready to name himself the interim commander of the Northern Forces, Harper corrected him. She tracked Wren's movements. He needs to establish control before the panic settles. Wren tapped the microphone. A sharp squeal of feedback echoed through the grand ballroom. The crowd fell dead silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward the stage. "Friends," Wren started. He pitched his voice to sound thick with fake grief. "We face a terrible tragedy tonight. The Northern King is gone." Harper looked at Orik. She gave him a sharp nod. "Let's go ruin his night," Harper said. She turned away from the railing and headed for the grand staircase. Chapter 18. Harper's heels clicked against the marble steps. The sound cut through the silence of the ballroom. She walked down the grand staircase with her head held high. The midnight blue silk swept behind her. Orik walked one step behind her right shoulder. He cast a tall, dark shadow. An alpha near the bottom of the stairs gasped. He dropped his champagne glass. The crystal shattered on the polished floor. The sound rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Eyes widened in shock. The whisper of a ghost spread through the room faster than the fire in the council chamber. "The king," someone muttered. "He is alive," another voice echoed. The crowd parted. Pack leaders and diplomats scrambled out of the way, creating a wide, clear path from the bottom of the stairs straight to the stage. Harper did not hesitate. She walked down the center aisle, her grip tight on the velvet clutch. Elder Wren froze at the podium. His hands gripped the edges of the wood. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a pale, panicked old man. His perfect plan crumbled right in front of his eyes. "Orik," Wren managed to say into the microphone. He forced a wavering, fake smile onto his face. "Praise the ancestors. We thought you perished in the fire." Harper reached the stage first. She walked right up the side steps. She did not stop until she stood directly in front of the peacekeeper. "Move," Harper ordered. Wren blinked, stunned by the sheer audacity of the human woman. He looked at Orik, who stepped up onto the stage right behind her. Orik's face held zero humor. He looked ready to snap the elder in half. Wren took a quick step back, abandoning the podium. Harper took his place. She grabbed the microphone. She opened her velvet clutch and pulled out the folded ledger papers. She flattened them out on the wooden surface for everyone to see. "My name is Harper," she announced. Her voice boomed through the speakers, steady and clear. "I spent the past 24 hours reviewing the trade agreements and supply manifests for this summit. The fire in the council chamber tonight was not an accident. It was an execution attempt." The crowd erupted in a chorus of shouts and growls. Pack leaders bared their teeth, looking around for an invisible enemy. "Quiet!" Orik roared. His voice did not need a microphone to shake the glass in the windows. The room fell silent again. "The man who set the fire is the same man who brought tainted meat into the dining hall," Harper continued. She held up the first ledger page. "He used a shadow company called Red Pine Farms to funnel summit funds. He used that money to purchase gray bane powder, a poison designed to kill an alpha in minutes." She pointed a finger at the Eastern pack leaders sitting in the front row. "He wanted you to eat the poison. He wanted you to die on Northern soil so your packs would declare war." "This is madness!" Wren shouted, stepping forward. He tried to reclaim the narrative. "This human is lying. She is a thief. She stole official documents. You cannot trust her word." "You are right, Elder," Harper countered smoothly. "They should not trust my word. They should trust your signature." Harper pulled the heavy brass cipher stamp from her clutch. She held it high in the air. The metal caught the light. "This stamp was recovered from the restricted archives," Harper declared. "It is the exact cipher used to authorize the fake deliveries. It is the exact cipher used to pay the rogue mercenaries who planted the poison." She flipped the brass stamp over and read the engraving on the back. "Property of Elder Wren, lead peacekeeper." Harper slammed the heavy brass stamp down on the wooden podium. The loud thud echoed through the speakers. "He wants a war," Harper told the crowd, her logic slicing through Wren's lies. "Because he controls the confiscation vaults. If you fight each other, he sells your own banned silver weapons back to you. He gets rich, and you bury your families." The ballroom exploded. Anger hit the room like a physical wave. Pack leaders roared in fury. The Eastern Alpha Harper saved earlier surged forward, his eyes flashing with rage. The diplomats shouted for guards. The entire summit turned their anger toward the stage. Wren backed away from the podium. His chest heaved. The grandfatherly facade shattered completely. He looked at the furious crowd, then at Harper, and finally at Orik. He realized he had no political moves left. The logic trapped him. The evidence condemned him. He reached into his white suit jacket. He did not pull out a speech. He pulled out a small, silver whistle. Chapter 19. Wren jammed the silver whistle between his teeth. He blew hard. No sound came out. The whistle sat pitched at a frequency human ears could not pick up, but the reaction in the ballroom was immediate. Every shifter in the room heard the sharp, piercing signal. Pack leaders' ears twitched, scanning the room for the source of the unnatural noise. Harper saw Orik's head snap toward the east wall. He grit his teeth, bracing for an impact. "What did he do?" Harper yelled over the rising chaos of the crowd. Orik did not get a chance to answer. The towering stained-glass windows lining the east wall of the ballroom shattered. Thousands of colored glass shards rained down on the polished floor like a deadly, glittering storm. The cold mountain wind howled through the broken frames, extinguishing the wall candles and sending the heavy drapes whipping into the air. Dozens of dark figures poured through the shattered windows. They swung in on thick climbing ropes, dropping right into the middle of the panicked crowd. Rogues. They wore thick leather armor and heavy dark cloaks. They smelled of wet dog, stale sweat, and cheap ale. They did not come for a political debate. They came for a slaughter. Wren's hired mercenaries hit the floor running. They drew long, curved hunting knives and heavy broadswords. The metal lacked the dull gray of steel. It gleamed with a stark, toxic white sheen. Silver. "Back!" an Eastern Alpha yelled, pushing his mate behind a heavy banquet table. The pack leaders were strong, but they were dressed for a gala, not a war. They wore silk suits and evening gowns. They had no weapons, and more importantly, they had no armor against the silver blades. The first rogue slashed his knife through the crowd, catching a northern diplomat across the ribs. The diplomat screamed as the silver burned his flesh, dropping to the floor in agony. Panic consumed the room. Guests scrambled toward the heavy main doors, creating a crushing bottleneck. On the stage, Wren let the whistle drop from his mouth. He backed toward the servant corridors behind the stage curtains. 5 heavily armed rogues flanked him, creating a protective wall of silver blades between the peacekeeper and the rest of the room. "Kill the king!" Wren shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Orik. "Burn the girl! Leave no witnesses!" 3 large rogues broke away from the pack. They vaulted onto the wooden stage. They held thick silver short swords, their eyes locked on Harper. Harper took a step back, her hand gripping the heavy brass stamp on the podium. It was a useless weapon against a sword, but she refused to cower. A dark blur moved past her. Orik stepped directly in front of her. He placed his body between the charging rogues and the midnight blue dress. He kept his left arm tucked tight against his chest, protecting the fresh, throbbing wound. He raised his right hand, his fingers curled into a brutal fist. "Get behind the podium," Orik commanded. He did not look at her. His eyes locked onto the 3 approaching killers. "Your left arm is useless," Harper warned, her logical mind analyzing the terrible odds. "They have silver." "I do not need my left arm," Orik said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating with an unnatural, heavy resonance. The first rogue swung his silver sword in a vicious, horizontal arc aimed at Orik's neck. Orik ducked under the blade. He drove his right fist into the rogue's chest. The impact sounded like a falling tree. The rogue flew backward, crashing off the stage and landing hard on a shattered banquet table. The second and third rogues attacked together. One thrust his blade low, the other swung high. Orik kicked the low attacker in the knee, snapping the joint backward. The rogue fell with a howl. Orik dodged the high swing, but the silver edge clipped the shoulder of his charcoal suit jacket. The fabric tore, and a fresh line of fire seared across his skin. Orik ignored the burn. He grabbed the rogue by the throat with his right hand and slammed him face first into the wooden floorboards of the stage. He stood up straight. His chest heaved. The charcoal suit jacket hung in ribbons. He looked down at the chaos in the ballroom. His guests were dying. His home was under attack. He turned his head slightly, looking back at Harper over his shoulder. "The signal," Orik rasped. The gold ring in his eyes expanded, swallowing the dark brown completely. The beast sat at the front of his mind, waiting for the human to honor the truce. Harper looked at the terrified crowd, the silver blades, and the fleeing peacekeeper. Logic dictated that a monster was the only thing that could stop a massacre. "Let him out," Harper ordered. "Go hunt!" Chapter 20. Orik closed his glowing gold eyes. He stopped fighting the cage. He stopped using jokes to hold the door shut. He grabbed the mental locks he spent decades building, and he ripped them apart. He unleashed the beast. The transformation did not look graceful. It looked violent. Orik's spine arched backward with a sickening crack. The seams of his black button-down shirt tore open as thick, dense muscle expanded across his chest and back. Dark, coarse fur erupted over his skin. His jaw elongated, his teeth extending into jagged, lethal fangs. He fell to his hands and knees. The white cotton bandage around his left arm snapped, revealing the angry, blackened gash from the silver knife. The wound hissed in the cold air, but the wolf felt no pain. The beast only felt rage. Brute stood up. He towered over the stage. He was a scarred nightmare of muscle and teeth, easily standing 8 feet tall on his hind legs. His dark fur bristled. His golden eyes swept over the ballroom, calculating the threat. He did not roar. He did not waste breath on a warning. A rogue rushed the stage, holding a silver spear. Brute moved with terrifying speed. He dropped to all fours, dodging the spear thrust. He lunged forward and clamped his crushing jaws around the rogue's armored shoulder. He ripped his head back, tossing the heavy man across the room like a stuffed toy. The rogue smashed into a stone pillar and slid to the floor, unmoving. The sheer violence of the attack made the remaining mercenaries freeze. They turned their attention away from the fleeing diplomats and focused on the giant wolf on the stage. Brute remembered the truce. The human woman in the midnight blue dress gave him a target. He ignored the lower-level thugs. His golden eyes locked onto the back of the room. Elder Wren stood near the servant doors, flanked by his 5 elite guards. Brute leaped off the stage. He hit the marble floor, his claws gouging deep tracks into the stone. He charged straight through the center of the ballroom. 2 rogues stepped into his path, swinging silver broadswords. Brute did not slow down. He used his good right arm to swat the first blade aside. He slammed his heavy shoulder into the rogue's chest, crushing his ribs. He spun on his heel, dodging the second blade, and kicked the other rogue hard into the wall. He tore through the attackers with brutal efficiency. He used his weight, his speed, and his teeth. He kept his injured left arm protected, fighting a one-sided war that left a trail of broken bodies in his wake. The pack leaders in the room saw the king fighting for them. The sight broke their panic. The Eastern Alpha grabbed a heavy wooden chair and smashed it over a rogue's head. Other Alphas joined the fray, using their sheer numbers to overwhelm the mercenaries. The tide of the battle turned in seconds. Brute ignored the shifting battle. He reached the back of the room. Wren's 5 elite guards formed a tight circle around the elder. They held long silver pikes, creating a lethal wall of spikes. Brute did not care. He let out a deafening, bone-rattling howl. He charged the wall. The first pike thrust forward. Brute grabbed the wooden shaft with his right hand. He yanked hard, pulling the guard forward, and snapped the man's neck with a quick, brutal strike. He used the stolen pike to sweep the legs out from under 2 more guards. The remaining 2 mercenaries panicked. They dropped their weapons and ran toward the shattered windows, abandoning their boss. Elder Wren stood alone. The peacekeeper backed up until his spine hit the solid oak doors of the servant corridor. His white suit was spattered with dirt and blood. He looked up at the towering, scarred beast looming over him. Brute leaned down. His snout stopped an inch from Wren's face. The wolf's hot breath hit the elder's cheeks. Brute bared his jagged fangs. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, promising a slow, agonizing end. The hunt was over. The prey was cornered. Brute raised his heavy right paw, ready to swipe the traitor's head clean off his shoulders. "Brute, stop!" The voice cut through the noise of the ballroom. It was calm. It was logical. Brute froze. His heavy paw hovered in the air. He turned his scarred head. Harper walked across the ruined ballroom. The midnight blue silk dragged over the broken glass. She stepped over a groaning rogue and walked right up to the beast. She did not look at the terrified elder pinned against the wall. She looked straight into the wolf's glowing golden eyes. "The hunt is over," Harper said, keeping her tone firm. "You caught him. Now let the pack deal with the trash." Brute stared at her. His chest heaved. He wanted the kill, but he remembered the deal. He lowered his paw. He let out a harsh huff of air, blowing Wren's silver hair back. The beast stepped away from the wall. He yielded to the strategist. Chapter 21. Elder Wren plastered his back against the solid oak doors. He watched the towering Lycan King step away. The beast obeyed the human. The impossible truth hit the peacekeeper like a splash of ice water. The monster did not possess a conscience, but he possessed a master. Wren saw his only opening. If he killed the master, the leash would snap, the beast would turn mindless, and the summit guards would have to put the king down. "Kill the girl!" Wren screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He pointed a shaking finger at Harper. "She controls the dog! Take her head!" 15 rogue mercenaries remained in the ballroom. They abandoned their skirmishes with the unarmed pack leaders. They gripped their silver broadswords and turned their attention to the woman in the midnight blue silk. They surged forward as one dark, desperate wave. Brute heard the order. The truce he made with Harper involved hunting the traitor. It did not cover protecting her from a small army. A new, volatile instinct erupted inside the wolf. The golden rings in his eyes vanished, consumed by a violent, glowing red haze. The bloodlust took over. A rogue lunged at Harper, swinging a silver blade aimed right at her collarbone. Brute intercepted the attack with terrifying speed. He slammed his heavyweight frame into the mercenary. The impact sounded like a boulder crushing a wooden cart. The rogue flew sideways, crashing through a marble pillar. The stone cracked. The man did not get back up. Brute let out a roar that shook the remaining glass in the window frames. He dropped to all fours and charged the incoming mob. He became a blur of dark fur and lethal muscle. He favored his injured left side, keeping the raw, blackened silver burn tucked close to his ribs. He did not need 2 arms to clear the room. His right paw and his jaws did the work. A mercenary thrust a spear at the wolf's chest. Brute sidestepped the silver tip. He clamped his jaws over the wooden shaft and bit down hard. The thick ash wood splintered into pieces. Brute spat the wood out, grabbed the rogue by the leather breastplate with his right hand, and hurled him over a broken banquet table. 2 more rogues tried to flank the beast. Brute spun on his heel. He caught the first man by the throat and slammed him into the floorboards. He drove his heavy foot into the second man's knee. The joint snapped with a loud, sickening crunch. Brute tossed the broken rogues aside like rag dolls. He enjoyed the crunch of the fight. The red haze in his vision highlighted the threats. He moved from target to target, a force of pure, unchecked nature. The Summit Alphas watched in stunned silence. They retreated to the edges of the ballroom, pulling their mates out of the line of fire. They witnessed the true power of the Northern King. This was not a mindless, rabid dog. This was an apex predator executing a tactical slaughter. Another rogue swung a heavy chain weapon. Brute ducked under the whistling iron. He surged upward, driving his thick skull under the rogue's chin. The man flipped backward and landed in a pile of shattered glass, out cold. The remaining mercenaries lost their nerve. The payday did not justify the nightmare tearing their ranks apart. 5 of them dropped their silver weapons and bolted for the shattered east windows. Brute did not let them escape. He bounded across the room, closing the distance in 3 long strides. He tackled the stragglers, pinning them to the floor with his sheer weight. He snapped a wrist here, crushed a shoulder there. He dismantled the threat with brutal, efficient strikes. In less than 3 minutes, the grand ballroom fell quiet. The floor resembled a war zone. Broken marble, shattered tables, and groaning mercenaries littered the space. Brute stood near the broken windows. The cold winter wind ruffled his dark, blood-matted fur. He let out a harsh, ragged breath. He left a path of ruin in his wake, and he stood victorious at the end of it. The room belonged to the beast. Chapter 22. The echoes of the fight faded into the howling wind outside. The ballroom remained dead silent, save for the moans of the broken rogues scattered across the floor. Brute stood in the center of the carnage. His broad chest heaved with every breath. Steam rose from his dark fur, hitting the freezing air blowing through the shattered windows. His eyes still glowed a brilliant, violent red. The bloodlust hummed in his veins, searching for another target. The Eastern Alpha, standing near a ruined table, took a slow step backward. The Alphas knew the lore. A Lycan King lost in the red haze rarely found his way back to human form without shedding innocent blood. They prepared to fight the monster they just watched save their lives. Harper did not share their panic. She stood near the wooden stage, her posture straight. She assessed the room with her sharp, logical mind. The immediate threats lay unconscious or broken. Elder Wren sat slumped against the far wall, trapped by 2 summit guards who had finally drawn their own swords. The only variable left in the room was the wolf. Harper stepped off the stage. She gathered the heavy midnight blue silk of her skirt in her left hand, lifting the hem above the jagged shards of broken glass. She walked toward the center of the room. "Stop!" the Eastern Alpha hissed, holding his hand out. "He will tear you apart." Harper ignored the warning. She kept her pace steady. She did not tiptoe. She did not sneak. Predators respected confidence. Prey hesitated. She walked past a groaning mercenary. She stepped over a discarded silver broadsword. She reached an overturned catering table near the center of the room. A stack of clean, folded white linen cloths sat untouched among the debris. Harper reached out and picked up a single white napkin. She turned her attention back to Brute. The giant wolf tracked her movement. His red eyes locked onto her face. He bared his jagged fangs, a low rumble starting deep in his throat. It was a warning sound. The beast demanded space. Harper gave him none. She closed the final distance between them. She stood right in front of the 8-foot-tall monster. The top of her head barely reached his chest. She could smell the metallic tang of copper and the sweat matting his dark fur. Brute leaned down. His dark snout hovered inches from her face. His hot breath rustled her dark hair. He waited for her to flinch. He expected her to drop her eyes in submission or scream in terror. Harper did neither. She raised her right hand. The entire ballroom held its collective breath. Harper held the white linen napkin out toward the wolf's face. "You got blood on your snout," Harper stated. Her voice carried no fear, only mild instruction. "Wipe your face. You look like a mess." Brute froze. The deep rumble in his chest hitched. He stared at the small square of white cloth, then back at her calm, expectant face. The sheer absurdity of the command short-circuited the bloodlust. He just tore through 15 armed mercenaries. He snapped bones and crushed armor. He stood at the apex of his violent nature, ready to wage war on the world. And the human strategist offered him a dinner napkin and criticized his grooming habits. The violent red glow in Brute's eyes flickered. Harper did not pull her hand back. She held the napkin steady, treating the apex predator of the northern mountains like a guest who spilled wine on his shirt. The beast let out a long, confused huff of air. The red haze broke apart, replaced by the familiar bright gold rings. The wolf blinked. The urge to kill faded, replaced by a strange, overwhelming sense of amusement. Brute realized he liked this human. She possessed unbreakable nerve. He leaned his heavy head forward and gave the napkin a gentle sniff. Chapter 23. Brute nudged the white linen cloth with his wet nose. He let out another huff, this one sounding remarkably like a sigh of resignation. He pressed his snout against Harper's palm, accepting the care. Harper wiped a streak of dirt and copper off his dark fur. She folded the ruined napkin and tossed it onto the floor. "Better," Harper declared. Brute closed his golden eyes. The thick muscles across his back and shoulders began to jump and shift. The transformation back to human form started. Harper took a step back to give him room. The sound of bones cracking and reforming echoed through the quiet ballroom. It sounded agonizing, but Orik did not make a sound. The dark fur receded into his skin. His spine straightened. A moment later, Orik dropped to one knee on the polished marble. He knelt in the center of the room, breathing hard. His charcoal suit jacket and black button-down shirt were gone, shredded during the change. He remained bare-chested in the freezing wind. The silver burn on his left forearm looked raw and angry, standing out against his pale skin. He kept his head bowed for a second, then his shoulders started to shake. A deep, genuine laugh rumbled out of his chest. He threw his head back and laughed aloud, the sound rich and full of life. It lacked the dry, defensive sarcasm he usually carried. It was the laugh of a man who just survived his own worst nightmare. "You handed a rampaging Lycan a dinner napkin," Orik managed to say between chuckles. He looked up at Harper, his dark brown eyes bright with amusement. "Manners matter, Your Majesty," Harper replied, her lips twitching into a small smirk. "Someone had to remind you that we had guests." Orik stood up. He ignored his bare chest and the cold air. He ignored the throbbing pain in his left arm. He felt lighter than he had in decades. The constant, agonizing pressure in his skull was gone. Brute rested quietly in the back of his mind, satisfied by the hunt and tamed by the strategist. The Eastern Alpha walked over, holding a long, heavy winter cloak he pulled from a coat check room. He offered the dark wool to the king. "Your Majesty," the Alpha said, bowing his head in genuine respect. "We owe you our lives. We thought the beast would consume you." "The beast knows his place," Orik said, taking the cloak with his right hand and swinging it over his shoulders. He looked at Harper. "And he knows who gives the orders." Orik turned his attention to the back of the room. Two northern guards held Elder Wren tight against the wall. The peacekeeper looked ruined. His white suit bore dark stains. His silver hair hung in his face. "Take him to the deep cells," Orik commanded, his voice cutting through the room with ironclad authority. "He faces a full council tribunal tomorrow. Confiscate his ledgers, freeze his accounts, and strip his title." "You cannot do this," Wren sputtered, struggling against the guards. "I am the peacekeeper. The summit needs me." "The summit needs the truth," Harper spoke up, stepping forward. "And the truth is, your shadow company is finished. The game is over." The guards dragged the shouting elder out through the servant doors. The remaining pack leaders began directing the castle staff to secure the broken rogues and clear the debris. The immediate crisis evaporated, leaving a mountain of cleanup and paperwork in its place. Orik walked over to Harper. He looked down at her. She stood tall in the midnight blue gown, surrounded by chaos yet perfectly calm. "Come on," Orik said, gesturing toward the grand staircase. "Let the guards handle the trash. We have plans to make." Chapter 24. A few hours later, the castle fell quiet. The injured received care, the rogues sat locked in iron cells, and the terrified guests returned to their secured quarters. The winter storm outside finally broke, leaving a calm, starry sky over the northern mountains. Orik stood on the high stone balcony attached to the royal wing. He wore a fresh, thick wool sweater. A royal medic had cleaned and properly bound the silver burn on his left arm. The wound still ached, but the poison was neutralized. He leaned his right hip against the stone railing, watching the snow drift across the courtyard below. The balcony doors clicked open. Harper stepped out into the cold night air. She still wore the midnight blue silk gown, though she had added a dark velvet shawl over her shoulders to fight the chill. She walked over to the railing and stood beside him. The Eastern and Southern Alphas held an emergency vote, Harper reported, looking out at the mountains. They officially stripped Wren of all ranks. They want to open a full investigation into the confiscation vaults tomorrow morning. Let them investigate, Orik said. They will find decades of stolen silver and dirty money. Wren built a quiet empire. An empire that needs to be dismantled, Harper noted. She gave him a sharp, calculating look. The northern packs will need to step in and manage the transition. You need to appoint someone to audit those vaults, reorganize the trade agreements, and handle the political fallout. Orik turned his head and studied her profile. That sounds like a brutal headache. I hate paperwork. You are the king, Harper pointed out. You do not have a choice. I have a lead strategist, Orik countered, a warm, knowing expression softening his features. She is very good at reading ledgers. She is also excellent at breaking and entering, and she handles aggressive dogs well. Harper turned to face him. Are you offering me a job, Your Majesty? I am offering you the entire northern court, Orik said. The smirk faded, replaced by deep, undeniable sincerity. Brute chose his target tonight, but he also chose you. He respects your logic. He yielded to your napkin. Harper raised an eyebrow. And what does the king want? Orik stepped closer. He reached out with his right hand and gently tucked a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed against her cheek. She smelled of crushed mint and old paper, a scent that grounded him better than any physical anchor. The king wants a partner, Orik said, his voice dropping into a low, rumbling hum. I spent my whole life fighting a war inside my head. You walked in, tripped over my boots, and ended the war in 2 days. I am not letting you walk away. He traced the line of her jaw. I bring the muscle, you bring the brain power. We rule the packs together. Harper looked up into his dark brown eyes. She saw the truth there. She saw the fierce loyalty of the beast and the sharp humor of the man. It was a flawless, logical equation. Rule number 1 remains in effect, Harper said, keeping her tone serious, though a smile threatened to break across her face. I lead the investigations. I track the paper trails. Agreed, Orik said. Rule number 2, she continued, you keep the guards off my back and you handle the heavy lifting. Done, Orik promised. And rule number 3, Harper whispered, taking a step into his space. She rested her hands flat against his chest, right over his beating heart. When the wolf wants to hunt, he waits for my signal. Orik wrapped his strong right arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The wolf, Orik murmured, his eyes flashing gold for one brief, happy second, is entirely yours. He closed the distance and kissed her under the northern stars. The king found his queen, the beast found his tether, and the brilliant strategist found a puzzle she would gladly spend the rest of her life solving. The end.